Hello, everyone. We in the Transformer fandom are absolutely buzzing over the brand new studio series Ironhide that is now leaked. We have full pictures of it, and the opinion has been interesting. I have seen people who think it is the best Ironhide toy they've ever seen. I have some people that are avoiding it like the plague for a multitude of different reasons. Looking at this, okay, yeah, the robot mode is fine. I have no real issue with the look of the robot mode. Everything looks fine. Um, I will admit there's one problem. We'll get to that in a bit. But it's the vehicle mode that has a lot of people talking because, one, we're lacking the yellow stripe again. We have a lot of exposed hinges, which look really ugly on the figure. And we have mismatched paint because Hasbro insisted on every window on Ironhide being translucent plastic, meaning there's a lot of sections that are a different shade of red than everything else. You know, Hasbro claims that they use translucent plastic so it makes the toy look more, I don't know, more dynamic, have more depth, not look as cheap. You know what looks really cheap is when you can't even get the shade of red consistent on the vehicle mode. You ever see one of those old cars driving down the road? It's this nice, kind of white, oldish kind of vehicle, and then there's just this like ratty blue door stuck to the side, because their door got damaged. They had to salvage a replacement because that's cheaper, and then they didn't want to pay out for like a paint job. So like now this is like weird inconsistent. That's what this is. That's what it looks like. That doesn't look like it's worth the money. It looks cheap. It makes the toy look cheap. But I digress. Yes, there's a lot of issues with it. One particular issue that I think is going over people's heads because we haven't seen a proper comparison shot yet is the fact that it's about the same size, if not shorter, than the Deluxe. So here's that exact same Optimus Prime figure next to Siege Ratchet, which of course was eventually remolded into Earthrise Ironhide. So it's the same height, it's the same size. If we go back and look, he comes up to about the same spot on Optimus Prime's shoulder, which now makes you wonder, this is a Voyager price point figure. Where did the money go? Now, granted, the vehicle looks huge. So if you're looking from like a vehicle standpoint, absolutely, this is, apparently a Voyager. But apparently all the engineering went into making this vehicle mode crunch down into that robot mode. So there's a lot of panels folding here and a lot of compressing, which is, engineering wise is not an unimpressive trick. But looking at it overall and just seeing the overall size that you end up with at the end, I'm not seeing where the Voyager budget went. He's got one gun. That's it. No accessories, no sled, no nothing. If this was like loaded out like the Masterpiece toy was or like Studio Series Hot Rod was, I'd be all for this being a Voyager. If this was like a lavish amount of paint like Override has, I'd be okay with this being a Voyager. But it does seem like there's things lacking here. We've got these weird pegs sticking out the top, which is obviously for Ratchet when that comes to. We have the exposed hinges in both modes. The robot mode also has a bunch of exposed translucent hinges all over the place. Something else that would have looked better if the whole thing was red, by the way. Yes, I'm going to keep harping on it. You know me by now. So, I don't know. I'm starting to feel bad for Ironhide because it feels like no matter how popular the character is or how much they try, it just never works, does it? Like, the toy always comes up short of what it's supposed to be. We have what I would consider definitive versions for a lot of characters at this point, including a lot of characters from the early G1 run. So now when I take a look at figures like this, I can kind of go like, wait, like what was this supposed to be and where did the budget go and why does it keep going wrong for Ironhide? So like for instance, okay, so let's take a look. We're going to take a look. I'm going to take you on a tour of G1 Ironhide toys over the years just so we can kind of get a bearing on just like how unfortunate of a time one of the main Autobots from the first year of Transformers has actually had. And that, of course, starts with the Generation 1 figure. Now, let's keep in mind, I'm kinder to the G1 figure than most people are. Okay, so it was never meant to be a robot in the original Diaclone line. It was meant to be a piloted mech, like a walker. It was never intended to be a standalone robot. So that explains the weird proportions. Now, the inconsistency is all down to the animation studio changing the character model. You can't blame the toy for that. And I find that the toy itself offers a play pattern that is lacking in all the other Autobots of that size and price point of that year. In order to get any kind of attack platform or battle station kind of play pattern, you had to go to Optimus Prime, which a lot of kids in 1984 couldn't afford. But Ironhide, you save up allowance for a few weeks, you get yourself an Ironhide. So that actually feels more like, like a nice little compromise. So I feel like this toy is actually not nearly as bad as people view it in hindsight, because if you look at it objectively, it offered something different back then, which was sorely needed. So after this, Ironhide had a dry spell all the way until the return of BotCon, the first ever box. I can't remember if it was. I think it was still OTFCC at the time, and then eventually got the BotCon name. The timeline gets a little bit wonky there for me, but either way, Energon Towline became Ironhide and Ratchet, which is an appropriate thing because, of course, the toy was intended to be an homage to the original Ironhide figure. It had this battle mode sled, so you had a lot of play pattern with that toy. I like the toy. As Ironhide, it's not bad, but it is off, because it's a BotCon / OTFCC toy. There's a lot of compromises because, of course, this design was not meant to be Ironhide literally. It's weird in proportions. They painted a silver stripe instead of a yellow one. I'm going to keep harping on that because you'll see. You'll see. But for what it was at the time, it actually was not a bad way of getting Ironhide at all. If you were lucky enough to be able to get a figure set that expensive, it was a decent Ironhide for its time. But obviously, it's not the G1 Ironhide people are after. The first time they attempted that was in 2008 for the Universe 2 line. And if you were a collector back then, we know how that went. I really do not like this toy. Universe 2 suffered a lot because it was being designed at the same time as Revenge of the Fallen, where I feel like a lot of toy designs just got way too complicated and way too over-engineered. Ironhide should not be a difficult toy to figure out. It's a boxy vehicle that turns into a boxy robot. That should be pretty simple. And yet we have this Ironhide, which has a huge backpack, a really like a lot of panel folding and kibble going on in order to crunch together to make his legs. And of course, the blue face. The blue face that everyone kind of went, "Aw." And it's a downward blue face. The toy itself cannot lift its head all the way up, so it just kind of looks like it looks terrible. And then you get to the vehicle mode. You have, again, translucent windows and then painted windows that do not come close to matching. But because the complicated design goes so over the top, you have tons of these panel lines going all throughout this vehicle mode, even through the windshield. The windshields look broken. How did they do that? And of course, once again, we have no yellow stripe. His vehicle mode is pretty much just like a blank panel of red on every side. You need to have something to break it up, and Ironhide is supposed to have that yellow stripe to break it up. Why the current one doesn't, when it's at a Voyager price point, it's a deluxe at a Voyager price point, and it doesn't have the budget to put a stripe on the side? Are you kidding me? Really? The Takara version did have a stripe, by the way. It's just a really complicated one because it has to go over so many freaking panels. This is why Repro Labels is still in business. Situations like these. I did not like this toy at all. At all. We move on. Ironhide in G1 style did not see another release all the way until Combiner Wars, and of course then he is a redeco of the off-road mold. Now, for starters, let's just get this out of the way. This is not a good Ironhide. Yellow stripe is there, but a truck is down to his movie form. We need a van. G1 Ironhide needs to be a van. And of course, the robot mode is just way too scrawny and lanky to even pass for the, rugged, kind of wide set powerhouse that is Ironhide. I always kind of felt like the G1, like the 84 Autobots in Combiner Wars, I always felt like those were like a backup plan, just in case the Combiner characters didn't take off, because, they'd been experimenting with combiners, but they hadn't actually, they hadn't done any, full-on combiners of the original Combiner characters. So I felt like just in case those characters didn't sell well, they baked in these G1, year 1, year 2 characters, like the main Transformer characters, as something of a backup plan. Just in case the first one's tank, we got these waiting in the wings, and we're going to make our money on these. So all of those 84 Autobots in Combiner Wars, none of them felt right. They all felt forced in. And this, this just kind of shows how forced in. It doesn't feel like Ironhide. It really isn't Ironhide. So moving on from Combiner Wars, we continue into Siege, where Ironhide got, at the very least, a proper-looking robot mode. Now, obviously, it's still not the G1 we're looking for because it's based on a Cybertronian-style alt mode, but at the very least, we got a posable, boxy, heavy Ironhide who looked pretty good, This was not a bad Ironhide figure to get. I still own the Ratchet version of it because that is just a really, really good toy. Now, this one we've kind of forgotten about because it got heavily retooled into the Earthrise version of the figure, where he does have much more proper colors. He has the proper G1 van mode. There is a lot of problems with this one too, obviously. So I don't like the part forming shield. I feel like a shield kind of goes against Ironhide a little bit because he's Ironhide, And I don't like shield accessories in the first place. Shield accessories always feel like, to me, like, here's a chunk of the vehicle that we couldn't be bothered to engineer, so you just had to pull it off and put it in his hand. I don't like shields. I don't like shields in my Transformers. Aside from that, weird issues. Like that block that makes his shoulder is still visible in the vehicle mode, so it's just a big dark gray block right in the middle of where the windows should be. Only half the windows are translucent and the other half are not even, they didn't even try to paint. And there's big feet sticking out the back of the vehicle. Regardless of that, this is still likely the best incarnation of G1 Ironhide that we had gotten at retail level. I mean, it was a difficult figure to get, don't get me wrong, but it's not the worst figure. I think it takes the Siege figure and does a few things to actually improve it, while throwing in a few weird oddities too. Okay, so at the very least, this one had the look and feel of Ironhide. Even if it still didn't get it right, it's the closest we ever got. And I would argue, the Studio Series figure is going to be great for those who don't want to pay aftermarket prices on the Earthrise Ironhide, but if you've got the Earthrise, I'm honestly not sure if you'd want to upgrade. It looks like they're both like comparable figures with equivalent flaws and advantages. Now, through all of this, I've intentionally avoided talking about the Masterpiece figure because, of course, comparing a Masterpiece to a retail figure really isn't fair. The Masterpiece really did do it best. The worst you can say about him is he's got a little bit of extra kibble on his hips. That's literally it. It's got the look of Ironhide. The vehicle mode is perfect with no hinges. Tons of accessories because Ironhide had tons of accessory options in the original show. Masterpiece took advantage of all of them. It has a piece to resemble the original sled to store all the extra weapons. He had his interchangeable hand, which was a huge thing for Ironhide. Like, his whole thing was, like, I'm gonna switch my hand for a liquid nitrogen gun. So cool that all that exists, and like, I still love this. This was my toy of the year once upon a time. This is a fantastic figure. Actually, it's my toy of the decade, now that I think about it. Yeah, it's a fantastic figure, and a magical transformation. Engineering on him is just chef kiss. Now, if we want to talk affordable Ironhide that did almost everything right, looks completely clean, and is well within your budget, do you know the option you have? Do you know the one option you have? Choro Q. The Q Transformer Ironhide. Look at him. Look at the little dumpy little dumpling of a robot. Look at him. He's got the colors and the shapes in the correct spots. All of the stuff that is supposed to turn into things turns into the right things. It captures the character well. Look at the van. Aside from a couple little spots in the windows where the engineering requires a little bit of weirdness, it looks like a very clean, perfect looking little van. All the windows match, and they don't look like they have cracks running through them. It's weird when you think about it. So that's your quick history lesson of G1 Ironhide's toys. And for such a simple character design, it's amazing to me how rarely it goes right. It's a popular character. Of course, it's a legacy character. So, it's a episode 1 character. But for some reason, a boxy vehicle turning into a boxy robot has escaped Hasbro for almost 40 years now. And we're getting close. We're getting close, but I still feel like the definitive Ironhide is not quite there yet. Really, this video was an excuse to talk about the Studio Series 86 one and acknowledge that, yeah, it's decent, but it's got its own problems. The size and the van throw me off. So, we'll see. Once it's in hand, maybe it'll feel like a $30 toy. Who knows? But thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. In general, just thank you for being you, and thank you for coming here to watch me. And hopefully I will see you next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.